Hello everyone, welcome to Hayes Secret Tales. Please enjoy this video.
The bedroom door swings open and time stops. Carter stands frozen, staring at me in his father's bed. At Julian pulling on his pants, my clothes scattered across the floor. His expression shifts from confusion to shock to raw betrayal. How long? The words crack. All summer? My best friend's face crumbles. Julian moves forward. Carter, please. But there's no explanation. His best friend and his father caught. The secret just exploded. How did we get here? How does forbidden love survive when everything falls apart? If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. I should have left when Carter drove away. That's what a good friend would have done. A smart person would have grabbed their stuff and called an Uber before Julian Reeves came out of that house with his shirt sleeves rolled up and his jaw set like he was done playing games. But I wasn't smart. I'd never been smart when it came to him. The summer had started innocently enough. Carter invited me to stay at his family's place for a few weeks between semesters, said I could use the pool, crash in the guest room. I'd said yes because my apartment was a shoebox with no air conditioning. I'd said yes before I knew his father would be home too. Julian Reeves was everything I shouldn't want. He was 46 to my 22. He was my best friend's dad. He was successful and sophisticated and completely out of my league. He was also 6'3" of solid muscle wrapped in dark skin that gleamed when he did his morning workouts on the patio. Devin. That's what he called me. Never Dev like Carter did. Always Devin, with this deliberate slowness that made my name sound intimate. It started with small things. Him making coffee in the morning when I stumbled downstairs, handing me a mug and letting his fingers brush mine for just a second too long. Him asking about my classes, my plans, my life, actually listening when I talked. Him swimming laps in the pool at dawn before anyone else was awake, water streaming down his chest and shoulders. Then it escalated. His hand on my lower back when he moved past me in the kitchen, his eyes tracking me across the room during dinner. That afternoon, he helped me carry groceries in, and our bodies ended up pressed together in the narrow hallway. Bags forgotten, breath mingling. His hand coming up to cup my jaw before Carter called from upstairs and we sprang apart. We hadn't talked about it, hadn't acknowledged the electricity that crackled between us every time we were in the same room. But it was there, and I knew he felt it too, from the way his gaze would linger on my mouth when I spoke, from the tension in his shoulders when I walked by, from the hunger in his eyes that he tried so hard to hide. This morning, Carter announced he was driving to campus to pick up some textbooks. Julian had been in his office. I'd been in the pool, trying to exhaust myself enough that I'd stop thinking about things I had no business thinking about. Carter left around 10. The house fell silent, except for the sound of water lapping against tile. I should have gotten out then. Should have gone inside, locked myself in the guest room. Anything to avoid being alone with him. Instead, I floated on my back, staring at the cloudless sky, trying to convince myself that nothing was going to happen. The sliding door opened, footsteps on the patio. I didn't have to look to know it was him. I could feel his presence like a physical weight. I lowered my feet to the bottom, turned to face him. Water streamed down my face as I pushed my hair back. He stood there in dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, looking like he'd just stepped out of a courtroom, all authority and controlled power. But there was nothing controlled about the way he looked at me. "He's gone," Julian said. Not a question, a statement of fact. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "For how long?" He said a couple hours. My voice came out rougher than intended. "Maybe longer if there's traffic." Julian's jaw tightened. He looked away for a moment like he was wrestling with something. Then his eyes locked back on mine with an intensity that made the water feel cold by comparison. "Get out of the pool, Devin." It wasn't a request. There was command in his voice, the same tone he probably used in court when he demolished opposing counsel. But there was something else too. Something raw and desperate that he was barely keeping contained. I should have said no. Should have laughed it off, made a joke, pretended I didn't understand what was really happening. Instead, I moved toward the ladder, feeling his eyes on me with every step. Water sluiced off my body as I climbed out, and I was suddenly hyper-aware of how little my swim trunks covered, how they clung to my body, how vulnerable I was standing there dripping on the hot concrete. Julian's gaze dragged down my frame with deliberate slowness, taking in every detail, and when his eyes met mine again, they were dark with want. He reached for a towel from the nearby chair and held it out. But when I took it, his hand didn't let go. We stood there, both gripping the towel, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with something else, something uniquely him. "I've been trying," he said quietly, voice strained. "God knows I've been trying to stay away from you." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Julian, don't." He released the towel, took a step back, ran a hand over his face. "Don't say anything that's going to make this worse. Don't tell me you haven't noticed. Don't tell me I'm imagining this." "You're not," I whispered. "You're not imagining it." Something in him snapped. I saw it happen. Saw the moment his control shattered. He closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his hand coming up to grip the back of my neck, fingers threading through my wet hair. We stood there frozen, his chest heaving, my breath coming in short gasps, both of us on the edge of something we couldn't take back. "This is wrong," he said, but his thumb brushed the side of my neck, tracing the pulse point that was beating frantically beneath his touch. "You're my son's best friend. You're 22 years old. I'm old enough to know better." "I don't care." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "I don't care about any of that." His eyes searched mine, looking for doubt, for hesitation. I gave him none. I'd spent weeks trying to fight this, trying to convince myself it was just a crush, just proximity, just loneliness. But standing there with his hand on my neck and his body radiating heat inches from mine, I knew the truth. This was deeper than attraction. This was need. "Towel off," Julian said, voice rough with barely restrained desire. His hand dropped from my neck, but his eyes never left mine. "My room. Now." He turned and walked back into the house, leaving me standing there trembling. For a heartbeat, I didn't move, couldn't move, my brain screaming at me to grab my stuff and leave, to not cross this line, to think about the consequences. Then I was moving, rubbing the towel quickly over my body, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the fabric. The house was cool after the heat outside. My bare feet left wet prints on the hardwood as I walked through the kitchen, past the living room where Carter and I had spent hours gaming. Down the hallway I'd walked 100 times, but never with this destination in mind. Julian's bedroom was at the end of the hall, door standing open like an invitation and a challenge all at once. He was standing by the window when I entered, his back to me, tension visible in every line of his body. I closed the door behind me with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the silence. He turned slowly, and the look on his face made my knees weak. "Last chance," Julian said. "You can walk out that door right now and we'll pretend this never happened. We'll go back to how things were." "We can't go back," I said. "We both know that." He crossed the room to me in 3 strides. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the hunger in his eyes. "I need you to be sure," he said, "because once we do this, everything changes. There's no going back to casual conversation over breakfast. No more pretending there's nothing between us. You understand that? I understood. I understood that this was reckless and potentially devastating and could blow up both our lives. I understood that Carter would probably never forgive me if he found out. I understood that age gaps and power dynamics and all the reasons this was complicated would still exist tomorrow morning. I understood all of it, and I didn't care. "I'm sure," I said. Julian's kiss was nothing like I'd imagined during all those sleepless nights in the guest room. It was harder, more desperate, filled with weeks of restraint finally breaking. His mouth claimed mine like he was starving, and I was sustenance, his hands gripping my waist and pulling me flush against him. I gasped against his lips and he deepened the kiss, his tongue sliding against mine in a way that made heat pool low in my stomach. My hands found his shoulders, gripping the fabric of his shirt, and I kissed him back with everything I had. He tasted like coffee and mint and something darker, something forbidden that made my head spin. His hands moved down to my hips, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise, and I didn't care. I wanted his marks on me, wanted proof that this was real. He walked me backward until my legs hit the bed, and we tumbled onto it together, his weight pressing me into the mattress. I'd fantasized about this, about him, but reality was so much better. The solid weight of his body, the way his hands moved over my skin like he was memorizing every curve and plane, the sound he made low in his throat when I arched up against him. "Devin," he breathed against my neck, lips tracing the line of my jaw. "God, you're so beautiful." No one had ever called me beautiful before. Cute, maybe. Hot if they were drunk enough. But beautiful? That was a word for art and sunsets, not for skinny college kids with too much ambition and not enough sense. But the way Julian said it, like it was truth, like he meant it down to his bones, made me believe it. His mouth moved lower, kissing along my collarbone, teeth grazing skin in a way that made me shudder. My swim trunks were still damp, clinging to my body, and his hand slid down to palm me through the fabric. I jerked at the contact, a sound escaping me that was half gasp, half moan. "Sensitive," Julian murmured, approval in his voice. He did it again, applying more pressure, and I bucked up into his hand, helplessly. "Julian, please." I didn't even know what I was begging for, just knew I needed more, needed everything he was willing to give. He hooked his fingers in the waistband of my trunks and looked up at me, one eyebrow raised in question. I lifted my hips in answer, and he pulled them down, tossing them aside. The air conditioning raised goosebumps on my exposed skin, but Julian's hands were warm as they traced patterns up my thighs, deliberately avoiding where I needed him most. "You're killing me," I managed. "Good," he said, but there was heat in his eyes. "I've been dying for weeks. Your turn." His mouth replaced his hands, and I forgot how to breathe. Forgot how to think. Forgot everything except the sensation of his lips and tongue working me with devastating skill. My hands fisted in his sheets, back arching off the bed, and he pinned my hips down with one strong arm across my stomach, holding me in place while he took me apart piece by piece. I tried to stay quiet, tried to remember that we were in his house, Carter's house, that the windows were open and the neighbors might hear. But Julian did something with his tongue that made stars burst behind my eyelids, and a cry tore from my throat before I could stop it. "Let me hear you," Julian said, pulling back just long enough to speak. "Don't you dare hold back." So I didn't. I let myself make noise, let myself be loud, let myself fall apart under his ministrations without shame or restraint. When the pressure built to an unbearable peak and I tumbled over the edge, his name was on my lips like a prayer. He gentled me through it, his touch softening, mouth pressing kisses to my hip bone, my stomach working his way back up my body until his face was level with mine. I kissed him, tasted myself on his tongue, not caring. His arousal pressed hard against my thigh through his slacks, and I reached between us, fumbling with his belt. "Your turn," I said, echoing his earlier words. Julian caught my hands, pinning them above my head with one of his. "Not yet. This is about you first." "Julian, I want to. I know." He kissed me again, slow and deep. "And you will. But right now I need you to just feel. Can you do that for me?" I nodded, unable to form words. He released my hands and I kept them where they were, gripping the headboard, watching as he stripped off his shirt. I'd seen him shirtless before, in the pool, working out. But this was different. This was him undressing for me, revealing himself with intention. His chest was broad and sculpted, skin dark and smooth except for the trail of hair that disappeared into his waistband. There was a scar on his left side, pale against the surrounding skin, and I wanted to kiss it, wanted to learn every story his body had to tell. He undid his belt, slacks, let them fall. His body was magnificent, all power and controlled strength, and I couldn't believe this was real, that he was here, that he wanted me. Julian retrieved something from the nightstand drawer, and I realized with a jolt what was about to happen, how far we were about to take this. My heart raced, but not with fear, with anticipation, with need so intense it made my hands shake. "Have you done this before?" Julian asked, his voice gentle but his eyes sharp, watching my face. "Once," I admitted. It didn't go well." His expression softened. He cupped my face with both hands, kissed me with a tenderness that made my chest ache. "I'll take care of you, I promise. If anything doesn't feel right, you tell me. Understood?" "Understood." He prepared me with patience I didn't know I needed, his fingers working me open slowly, carefully, his mouth on mine swallowing every gasp and whimper. He kept asking if I was okay, kept checking in. And I loved him for it, even as I wanted him to hurry up, to just take me already. "Please," I finally begged. "Julian, please, I'm ready." He positioned himself, one hand on my hip, the other guiding himself to my entrance. Our eyes locked as he pressed forward, inch by agonizing inch, and the stretch was intense but not painful, not with the care he was taking. I breathed through it, focusing on the feel of him, the weight of his body over mine, the way his jaw was clenched with the effort of going slow. "Breathe," he reminded me, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. I exhaled shakily, and he slid deeper, and suddenly he was fully seated inside me, and we both groaned at the sensation. Julian stayed still, giving me time to adjust, his forehead pressed to mine. "Okay?" he rasped. "More than okay," I managed. "Move, please move." He did, pulling back and thrusting forward in a slow rhythm that built gradually. Every nerve ending in my body was on fire. Every sensation heightened beyond anything I'd experienced before. This wasn't like my fumbling attempt freshman year with a guy whose name I barely remembered. This was connection, intensity, Julian's eyes on mine as we moved together, his hands on my body like I was precious, like I mattered. The pace increased and I wrapped my legs around his waist, changing the angle, and we both gasped as he hit something inside me that made my vision white out. He did it again and again, finding that spot and targeting it with precision that spoke of experience I didn't have but was grateful he did. "Touch yourself," Julian commanded, and I obeyed, my hand moving between our bodies. The combination of his movements and my own touch was overwhelming, and I felt that familiar tension building again, impossibly fast. "I'm close," I warned, voice breaking. "Let go," Julian said. "Let me see you." I came with his name on my lips, my whole body tensing and shaking with the force of it. Julian followed moments later, his movements becoming erratic before he buried himself deep with a groan that vibrated through both our bodies. We stayed like that, trembling, gasping, slowly coming back to earth. He pulled out carefully, and I winced at the loss. Julian gathered me against his chest immediately, his arms tight around me, lips pressed to my temple. "You okay?" he murmured. "Better than okay," I said honestly. My body felt boneless, sated in a way I'd never experienced. That was, "Yeah," he agreed, understanding without me having to finish. We lay there in comfortable silence, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my back. Reality would crash in soon enough. Carter would come home. We'd have to figure out what this meant, how to navigate the impossible situation we'd created. But for now, in this moment, it was just us. "What happens now?" I finally asked. Julian was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he admitted. "This is complicated, Devin. More complicated than either of us probably wants to acknowledge." I know. I did know. But I also knew I didn't regret it. Couldn't regret it. "We should talk about this. Really talk, not just..." He gestured vaguely at our naked bodies. "This. But you don't regret it?" I needed to hear him say it. Julian tilted my chin up so I was looking at him. His eyes were serious, but warm. "No, I should, but I don't. I've wanted you since the day you walked into my house in those ridiculous shorts carrying a duffel bag and looking at me like I was something special. I've been fighting it every day since." My heart swelled. "I thought I was imagining it. The way you looked at me." "You weren't imagining anything." He kissed me softly. "But we need to be smart about this. Carter can't know. Not yet. Maybe not ever, depending on how this goes." The mention of Carter sent a spike of guilt through my chest. He's my best friend. I know, and he's my son, which is why we need to be careful. Julian's expression was pained. I don't want to hurt him, but I also don't think I can give this up now that I've had you. The possessiveness in his voice made something primal in me purr with satisfaction. "So what do? We take it slow, we're discreet, and we figure out if this is just physical or if it's something more." I already knew it was something more, at least for me, but I nodded, understanding the wisdom in his caution. "Okay." A car door slammed outside. We both froze. "Shit," Julian muttered, pulling away and reaching for his clothes. That might be Carter. We dressed in record time, my hands fumbling with my still damp swim trunks. Julian looked remarkably composed considering what we'd just done, though his hair was slightly mussed and his lips were swollen from kissing. I probably looked thoroughly debauched. "Bathroom," Julian directed, pointing to the ensuite. "Clean up. Take your time. I'll go see if that's him." I nodded, slipping into the bathroom and closing the door. I caught sight of myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. My lips were red and swollen. My neck had what was definitely the beginning of a mark, and my eyes were bright with satisfaction that I couldn't hide if I tried. I heard voices in the hallway. Carter's voice, then Julian's, casual and normal like nothing had happened. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to calm down, trying to look like I hadn't just spent the last hour in bed with my best friend's father. When I emerged from the bathroom, Julian was gone. The bedroom was empty except for the rumpled sheets that told the story of what had transpired. I straightened them quickly, then slipped out into the hallway. Carter was in the kitchen, unpacking bags of textbooks onto the counter. "Hey man," he said when he saw me. "Where have you been? Thought you'd still be in the pool." "Got out a while ago," I said, hoping my voice sounded normal. "Took a shower," He didn't seem to notice anything off. Cool. Hey, you want to grab lunch? There's this new burger place that opened near campus. Sure, I agreed, relieved to have an excuse to leave the house, to get some distance and perspective. Julian appeared in the doorway, now wearing a different shirt, hair damp like he'd splashed water on it. His eyes met mine for a brief second, and I saw the heat there, banked but not extinguished, before he looked away. You boys heading out? He asked. Yeah, lunch, Carter said. Want us to bring you anything back? No, I'm good. Have fun. As Carter and I headed to his car, I felt Julian's gaze on my back. I didn't turn around, couldn't. One look and Carter would know something had changed, that his friend and his father had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. In the car, Carter talked about his professors, about the textbooks he'd bought, about how expensive everything was getting. I made appropriate sounds of agreement while my mind replayed every moment of the past hour. Julian's hands on my body, his voice in my ear. The way he'd looked at me like I was everything. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. We need to talk later. When he's asleep, come to my office. Jay. I saved the number under a neutral name and put the phone away. Carter was still talking, oblivious. Guilt twisted in my gut, but it was overshadowed by anticipation. Tonight. Julian wanted to see me tonight. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Lunch with Carter, where I barely tasted my food. Back to the house where I tried to act normal. Playing video games with Carter, while hyper-aware of Julian's presence somewhere else in the house. Dinner where I sat across from Julian and tried not to remember how his hands had felt on my skin, how he'd looked at me in that moment before he kissed me. Carter went to bed around 11. I waited in my room, door cracked, listening for his footsteps to cease, for the house to settle into silence. At midnight, I crept down the hallway to Julian's office. The door was closed but unlocked. I slipped inside. Julian was at his desk, paperwork spread in front of him, but I knew he hadn't been working. He looked up when I entered, and the expression on his face made my breath catch. Lock the door, he said quietly. I did. When I turned back, he was standing, moving around the desk toward me. We met in the middle of the room and he pulled me into his arms, kissing me like he'd been starving for it all day. Maybe he had been. God knows I had. I haven't been able to think about anything else, Julian murmured against my lips. All afternoon, all through dinner, you're all that's been on my mind. Me too, I confessed. He led me to the leather couch in the corner of his office, pulling me down beside him. We need to establish some rules, he said, if we're doing this. Okay. Carter cannot find out. Not until we're sure about what this is, and maybe not even then, depending on how he'd react. I nodded. That made sense, even if it hurt to think about lying to my best friend. We're discreet. No texting anything explicit. No obvious signs when Carter's around. We act exactly like we have been. Understood. Julian's hand cupped my face. And you can change your mind at any time. If this gets too complicated, if you meet someone your own age, if you decide this isn't what you want, you tell me. No judgment, no hard feelings. The thought of being with anyone else when Julian Reeves existed made my stomach turn, but I nodded anyway. Same goes for you. He smiled slightly. I don't think you have to worry about that. We sat there for a while just holding each other, his fingers threading through my hair. It felt domestic in a way that terrified and thrilled me simultaneously. How long are you staying? Julian asked. Another 3 weeks. Then I have to go back for summer classes. 3 weeks. He said it like he was calculating, planning. We make the most of them, carefully. I kissed him again, because I could. Because in this room with the door locked and Carter asleep down the hall, we could pretend the outside world didn't exist. His response was immediate and heated, hands sliding under my shirt, relearning the terrain he'd mapped earlier. We couldn't risk more tonight, not with Carter in the house, but we kissed until my lips were swollen and I was aching with need. When I finally slipped back to my room, well past 2 in the morning, I fell asleep with the taste of him still on my tongue and the promise of tomorrow heavy in my chest. The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern. Days spent maintaining normalcy, Carter never suspecting anything was wrong. Nights stolen in Julian's office after Carter fell asleep, learning each other in whispered conversations and heated touches. We couldn't risk his bedroom again, couldn't risk noise or time, so we found other ways. Quick encounters that left us both breathless and wanting more. It was torture and paradise in equal measure. Having Julian but not being able to claim him publicly. Wanting to reach for his hand across the dinner table and having to keep my hands to myself. Watching him in the pool, doing his morning laps and remembering how that body felt, pressed against mine. Carter noticed I seemed distracted. He asked if everything was okay, if something was bothering me. I blamed it on stress about my summer classes, about money, about anything except the truth. The lies sat heavy on my tongue, but I told them anyway, because the alternative was losing everything. Julian was better at hiding it. He'd had years of practice maintaining composure in high-pressure situations. But I caught him watching me sometimes when he thought no one was looking, and the hunger in his eyes made my knees weak. We texted in code, innocuous messages about groceries and schedules that really meant, "I need you," and "tonight." He called me from his office at work just to hear my voice, hanging up quickly when someone walked by. I started recognizing his tells, the way his jaw tightened when he wanted to kiss me but couldn't, the way his fingers drummed on the table when he was thinking about me. It wasn't sustainable, we both knew it, but neither of us was ready to acknowledge it yet. Then Carter announced he was going to a party 2 hours away, planning to stay overnight at a friend's place. Julian and I made appropriately interested noises while our eyes met across the room and spoke volumes. Carter left Friday evening. We waited until his car disappeared down the street before we even looked at each other. The second his taillights vanished, Julian was on me, backing me against the wall, kissing me with weeks of pent-up frustration. We barely made it to his bedroom. That night was different from our stolen moments in his office. We had time. We had privacy. We had the whole night stretched out before us like a gift. Julian made love to me slowly, thoroughly, taking his time to learn every sound I made, every spot that made me gasp. We talked between rounds, sharing things we couldn't say when Carter was around. He told me about his divorce, how it had been amicable but lonely, how he'd thrown himself into work to avoid dealing with the emptiness. I told him about growing up in a small town where being different meant being invisible, about choosing a college far from home just to breathe. We talked about books and music and stupid things that made us laugh. And somewhere in those hours, I realized I was falling for him in a way that had nothing to do with physical attraction. In the morning, I woke up in his bed, sunlight streaming through the windows, his arm heavy across my waist. He was already awake, watching me with an expression that made my heart stutter. "Hi," I said, suddenly shy despite everything we'd done in the dark. "Hi yourself." He brushed hair off my forehead. "Sleep okay?" "Better than okay." We made breakfast together, moving around his kitchen like we'd done it 1,000 times. He cooked eggs while I made toast, stealing kisses between tasks. It felt normal. It felt right. It felt like something that could be a future instead of just a summer fling. But summer flings end. That truth sat between us, even as we pretended it didn't exist. Carter came home Sunday afternoon full of stories about the party. Julian and I had rehearsed our alibis. I'd spent the weekend studying. Julian had caught up on work. Carter bought it without question, because why wouldn't he? We were good liars by then. We'd had practice. The remaining week crawled by. My departure date loomed like a death sentence. Neither Julian nor I talked about it, but it was there in every touch, every look. What happens when I leave? What happens to us? 3 days before I was supposed to go, Julian asked me to stay. Not forever, just a few more weeks. He'd talked to a friend who ran a summer program for pre-law students, gotten me a spot if I wanted it. It would look good on my resume. It would give us more time. I said yes. Carter was thrilled when I told him. He hugged me, said it was amazing that I got into the program, said we could hang out more before school started. Julian watched from across the room with a carefully neutral expression. But when Carter turned away, Julian's eyes met mine, and the heat in them made my stomach flip. Those extra 3 weeks became the best and worst of my life. Best because I got to be with Julian in ways we couldn't risk before. Worst because every day that passed brought us closer to the inevitable end, and I was falling so hard for him that the thought of leaving made it difficult to breathe. Carter's internship kept him busy most days. He'd leave early and come home exhausted, usually going straight to bed after dinner. Julian and I became masters of stolen moments, his hand brushing mine when we passed in the hallway, his foot finding mine under the dinner table. Heated looks across rooms that promised everything we'd do later when Carter was asleep. The nights were ours. I'd wait until Carter's breathing evened out in his room, then slip down the hall to Julian's office or his bedroom. We'd make love quietly, desperately, both of us trying to memorize every touch, every sound, every moment. Afterward, we'd lie tangled together and talk about everything and nothing. He told me about his dreams when he was young, before law school, and marriage and responsibility. I told him about wanting to make something of myself, about being terrified I wasn't good enough. "You're more than good enough," Julian whispered one night, his fingers tracing patterns on my bare shoulder. "You're extraordinary, Devin. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I wanted to believe him, wanted to think that maybe I could be someone worthy of a man like Julian Reeves. But doubt crept in during the daylight hours when I saw how effortlessly sophisticated he was, how commanding his presence, how completely out of my league. The pre-law program was intense. Long days of mock trials and legal research and networking with attorneys who could make or break my future career. Julian helped me prepare, drilling me on case law, teaching me how to think like a lawyer. Those study sessions in his office were a special kind of torture, being so close to him but having to focus on work, knowing Carter could walk in at any moment. One evening during the second week, we were reviewing a brief when Julian's hand covered mine on the desk. I looked up to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "What?" I asked. "You're brilliant," he said quietly. "Do you know that? The way your mind works, how quickly you grasp complex concepts. You're going to be an incredible lawyer someday." My cheeks heated. "I'm just doing what you taught me." "No." His thumb brushed across my knuckles. "This is all you. I'm just helping you see what was already there." I wanted to kiss him, wanted to climb into his lap and show him how much his faith in me meant. But Carter was in the next room, so I settled for squeezing his hand and hoping he understood. The program culminated in a mock trial where students argued cases in front of real judges. I was assigned to prosecute a complicated fraud case, and I spent days preparing with Julian's help. The night before the trial, I was a wreck, convinced I'd fail, that I'd embarrass myself in front of everyone. Julian found me in the guest room at midnight, pacing and rehearsing my opening statement for the 100th time. "Hey," he said softly from the doorway. "You need to sleep." "I can't. I'm gonna mess this up tomorrow. I'm not ready." He crossed the room and took my face in his hands, forcing me to meet his eyes. "You're ready. You've worked harder than anyone in that program. You know this case inside and out. Tomorrow you're going to walk into that courtroom and show them exactly who Devin Carter is." "What if I freeze? What if I forget everything?" "You won't." His voice was firm, certain. "And even if you stumble, you'll recover. Because that's who you are. You don't give up." He kissed me then, soft and sweet, and some of the panic eased. We couldn't risk more, not with Carter down the hall, but Julian held me until my breathing steadied and my hands stopped shaking. The next day, I walked into that mock courtroom with Julian's words echoing in my head. I delivered my opening statement without notes, cross-examined witnesses with precision, and gave a closing argument that had the judge nodding along. When the verdict came back in my favor, I looked into the audience and found Julian sitting in the back row, pride written all over his face. That night we celebrated. Carter went out with friends from his internship, giving Julian and me the house to ourselves. Julian cooked dinner, something he rarely had time for, and we ate on the patio under the stars. He opened a bottle of expensive wine and toasted to my success. "To Devin," he said, raising his glass, "who proved today that he belongs in any courtroom in this country." We drank, and then Julian pulled me to my feet and into his arms. We danced without music, swaying together in the warm night air, and I felt something shift between us. This wasn't just physical anymore. This wasn't just a summer fling. This was real. "I'm falling for you," I whispered against his chest. "I know I shouldn't. I know this is complicated and probably a terrible idea, but I can't help it." Julian went still. For a horrible moment I thought I'd made a mistake, said too much too soon. Then his hand came up to cup the back of my head, and he kissed me with a tenderness that made my eyes sting. "I fell for you weeks ago," he admitted. "That day in the pool, when you looked at me like I was the only person in the world who mattered. I knew then that I was in trouble." We made love that night in his bed with the windows open and the summer breeze washing over us. It was different from before. Slower, more intense. Every touch felt like a promise, every kiss like a vow. When we finally collapsed together, sweaty and sated, Julian pulled me close and I felt his heart beating against my back. "What happens when the program ends?" I asked the question we'd both been avoiding. Julian was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he finally said. "But I know I don't want to lose this. Don't want to lose you. Carter will find out eventually." "I know." His arms tightened around me. "And we'll deal with it when that happens. Together." The final week of the program arrived too quickly. My last day of classes, my last mock trial, my last chance to prove myself to the attorneys who'd been observing us. I threw myself into the work, partly because I wanted to excel, and partly because if I was busy, I didn't have to think about leaving. Julian and I stole every moment we could, quick kisses in empty hallways, his hand on my thigh under the dinner table, whispered conversations in his office that turned into heated encounters we had to cut short when we heard Carter's footsteps. The night before I was supposed to leave, Julian asked me to meet him after Carter went to sleep. Not in his office or bedroom, but in the pool where this had all started. I slipped out of the guest room just after midnight and found him already in the water, moonlight turning his dark skin silver. I stripped down to my boxers and slid in beside him. The water was cool after the heat of the day, and we floated there in silence for a while. both of us knowing this might be our last night together like this. "I need to tell you something," Julian finally said, "and I need you to just listen until I'm done." My heart started pounding. Okay. I've been thinking about this for weeks now, about us, about what this means. He moved closer, his hands finding my waist under the water. "I'm 46 years old, Devin. I've been married, divorced, built a career, raised a son. I thought I had everything figured out. And then you walked into my life and turned everything upside down." "Julian, let me finish." His voice was gentle but firm. "You're 22. You have your whole life ahead of you. Law school, career, relationships with people your own age who don't come with all the complications I do. And part of me thinks the right thing to do is let you go. Let you have that life without me weighing you down." Panic clawed at my chest. "Is that what you want? To let me go?" "No." The word came out fierce. "God, no. That's the problem. I know I should want that for you, but I'm too selfish. I want you in my life, Devin. Not just for another week or a summer, but for as long as you'll have me." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you." His hands framed my face, thumbs brushing my cheekbones. "I'm saying that if you want this, if you want us, I'll find a way to make it work. Long distance, weekends, whatever it takes. And when you're ready, when the time is right, we'll tell Carter. We'll deal with the fallout together." Tears stung my eyes. "You love me." "Yes." He kissed me softly. "I love you." "I love you too." The words tumbled out, and saying them felt like the most honest thing I'd ever done. "I love you so much it scares me." Julian pulled me against him, and we held each other in the moonlit water, both of us shaking. This was crazy. This was impossible. This was exactly what I wanted. "We'll make this work," he promised. "I don't care how hard it is. You're worth it." We made love in the pool that night, water lapping around us, stars overhead, both of us pouring everything we felt into every touch. When we finally climbed out, dripping and breathless, Julian wrapped me in a towel and held me close. "Come back to me," he whispered. "Every weekend you can, every break. And when you graduate, we'll figure out the next step." I nodded against his chest, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Morning came too soon. Carter helped me pack, talking about how cool it was that I'd done the program, how he'd see me when school started. Julian stayed in his office again, door closed, because goodbyes were easier this way. But this time was different. This time I wasn't driving away unsure of what we were or where this was going. This time I had Julian's promise, his love, his commitment to making this work. As I loaded the last bag into my car, Julian emerged from the house. He crossed the driveway with measured steps, very aware of Carter watching from the porch. "Safe drive," he said, voice carefully neutral. "Thanks." I met his eyes and saw everything he couldn't say reflected there. "And Devin?" He dropped his voice so only I could hear. 2 weeks. I'll be counting every day." My heart swelled. "Me too." I drove away with tears on my cheeks and hope in my chest. The road stretched out ahead of me. 4 hours back to reality. Back to my cramped apartment and summer classes and life without Julian Reeves filling every corner. But it wasn't goodbye. Not anymore. My phone buzzed before I even hit the highway. A text from Julian. "I already miss you. Drive safe. Call me when you get there. I love you." I pulled over to respond because there was no way I could type and drive with my hands shaking like this. "I love you too. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, he confirmed, and then every weekend after that if I have my way." I laughed through my tears and pulled back onto the road. 2 weeks. I could survive 2 weeks, and then I'd be back in his arms where I belonged. The next 14 days were the longest of my life. Summer classes kept me busy during the day, lectures on constitutional law and contracts that should have fascinated me, but just made me check my phone every 5 minutes hoping for another text from Julian. Nights were torture. I'd lie in my cramped apartment, staring at the ceiling, counting down the hours until our nightly call. Julian and I talked every evening after Carter went to bed. Video calls that stretched into the early morning hours. We talked about everything. My classes and the professor who reminded me of him. His cases and the opposing counsel who tried to intimidate him in court that day. The book he was reading. Some dense political thriller he kept losing his place in because he was thinking about me instead. The restaurant he wanted to take me to. A little Italian place with candlelit tables and wine older than I was. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. We'd just fall asleep with the call connected, finding comfort in each other's digital presence. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to see him still there on my screen, chest rising and falling steadily, and my heart would ache with how much I missed him. The physical distance was manageable. It was the emotional distance that killed me. Knowing he was going through his days without me there, eating breakfast alone, swimming his morning laps with no one watching from the windows. He sent me photos throughout the day, the coffee he made exactly how I liked it, the spot on the couch where I always sat, his empty bed with a caption that just said, "Missing you here." I saved every single one. Carter texted me occasionally, casual updates about his internship and asking when I'd visit again. Each message made the guilt gnaw deeper. He was my best friend, had been since freshman year, when we bonded over terrible dining hall food and a shared hatred for our economics professor. We'd been through everything together, late-night study sessions and failed exams and celebrating when we both got into our top-choice law schools. He'd been there when my grandmother died, when my first serious boyfriend cheated on me, when I questioned whether I was smart enough to make it in law. And now I was lying to him every single day, carrying on a secret relationship with his father, right under his nose. Every text from Carter felt like a knife to the chest. "Hey man, miss you? When you coming back up?" And I'd respond with some excuse about summer classes and work, all while knowing the real reason I'd be back was Julian. Not him. Julian had warned me about the guilt, said it would get easier with time. But he was wrong. It got worse. Every casual conversation with Carter, every inside joke, every time he called me his best friend, the weight of the secret grew heavier. But Julian was right about one thing. We needed time to figure out what this was before we brought Carter into it. Were we just a summer fling that would burn out by fall? Or was this something real, something worth fighting for, something worth potentially losing Carter's friendship over? I was terrified of the answer, but more terrified of not finding out. On day 12, Julian sent me a plane ticket. Not for the weekend I was supposed to drive up, but for Thursday night. The email came through at 3 in the afternoon while I was sitting in contracts class, and I had to excuse myself to the bathroom because I couldn't stop grinning like an idiot. "I can't wait 2 more days, his text said. "Carter will be at his internship retreat all weekend, 3 nights, just us. Please say you can come." I should have thought about it. Should have considered my class schedule, my part-time job at the campus bookstore. Instead, I texted back yes before I even left the bathroom stall. I rearranged my class schedule, called in sick to my part-time job, and booked a ride to the airport. 12 hours later, I was standing in Julian's driveway, bags in hand, heart racing. He met me at the door and pulled me inside before I could even knock. The kiss was desperate, weeks of longing compressed into a single moment. We stumbled toward his bedroom, leaving a trail of clothes behind us. and he made love to me like a man starving. Afterward, lying tangled in his sheets with his heart beating under my ear, I felt something settle in my chest. This was right. This was home. It didn't matter that he was older, that he was my best friend's father, that the world would judge us. None of that mattered when I was in his arms. We spent the weekend wrapped up in each other. Julian took me to that restaurant he'd mentioned, a quiet place outside the city where no one would recognize us. We walked through a park holding hands like any other couple. We cooked breakfast together and made love in the afternoon, and talked about the future like it was something we could actually have. Sunday evening came too quickly. My flight left at 8, which meant we had to leave for the airport by 6. Julian drove me, and we were quiet for most of the ride, both of us trying to memorize these last moments. At the departures curb, he pulled me into a hug that lasted too long to be casual, but neither of us cared. "Next weekend," he said against my hair, "and every weekend after that until you're sick of me." That'll never happen. He kissed me one more time, quick and fierce, then let me go. I walked into the airport without looking back because if I did, I'd never get on that plane. The pattern continued through the rest of summer and into fall. Every other weekend I flew to see Julian, or he drove to me. We got better at hiding it, better at the logistics of secret relationships. Carter never suspected, too wrapped up in his own life to notice the way his father's mood improved every time I visited. But secrets have a way of coming to light. It happened in October, 3 months after that first day in the pool. I'd driven up for the weekend, and Carter was supposed to be staying at a friend's place. Julian and I had gotten careless, confident in our routine, sure we had the whole night to ourselves. We were in Julian's bed, wrapped around each other in the aftermath, when we heard the front door open. Carter's voice calling out, saying he'd forgotten his wallet, that he'd just be a minute. We froze. My clothes were scattered across Julian's bedroom floor. My car was in the driveway. There was no innocent explanation for why I was there on a weekend when Carter was supposed to be gone. Julian moved first, pulling on his pants and crossing to the door. "Stay here," he said quietly. "Let me handle this." But before he could leave the room, Carter's footsteps sounded in the hallway. The bedroom door swung open, and Carter stood there, wallet in hand, his expression going from confused to shocked to angry in the space of 3 seconds. "Dad?" His eyes went from Julian to me, to the rumpled bed, to my clothes on the floor. "What the fuck is going on?" Julian stepped forward, hands raised. "Carter, let me explain." "Explain what?" Carter's voice was rising. "Explain why Devin is in your bed? Explain why my best friend and my father are—" He couldn't even finish the sentence, disgust and betrayal written all over his face. "Carter, please." I started to get up, holding the sheet around my waist, but Carter held up a hand. "Don't! Don't you dare!" His eyes blazed. "How long? How long has this been going on?" Julian and I exchanged a look. There was no point lying now. "Since summer," Julian said quietly. "Since July." Carter laughed, but there was no humor in it. "July, Jesus Christ, all those weekends Devin came to visit, all those times you said he was here to see me." He looked at me with something like hate. "You were fucking my father the whole time." "It's not like that," I said desperately. "Carter, I love him." Wrong thing to say. Carter's face went red. "You love him? He's my dad, Devin. He's 46 years old. And you just what, decided to have a summer fling?" "It's not a fling," Julian said firmly. "I love him too, Carter. This isn't something casual." Carter stared at his father like he'd never seen him before. "You're serious. You're actually serious about this?" "Yes." The silence stretched out, heavy and awful. Then Carter shook his head and headed for the door. "I can't. I can't deal with this right now. Carter, wait. Julian followed him into the hallway. Let's talk about this. Talk about what? About how you've been lying to me for months? About how my best friend betrayed me? Carter's voice cracked. I trusted both of you. I know. Julian's voice was thick with emotion. And I'm sorry. We should have told you sooner. But Carter, this is real. What Devin and I have, it's not going away. Carter looked between us, and I saw the moment something broke in him. Fine. You want each other? Have each other. But don't expect me to be okay with it. He grabbed his wallet from the hall table and headed for the door. Julian called after him, but Carter just kept walking. The front door slammed, and then there was silence. I found my clothes and dressed with shaking hands. Julian stood at the window, watching Carter's car disappear down the street, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He'll come around, I said, not believing my own words. Will he? Julian turned to face me, and his expression gutted me. That's my son, Devin. I've just lost my son. You haven't lost him. He's hurt, but he'll understand eventually. Julian shook his head. You don't know that. You saw his face, the way he looked at us. Guilt crashed over me in waves. This was my fault. I'd known from the beginning how wrong this was, how much we stood to lose, but I'd pursued it anyway. I'd let myself fall for Julian knowing it could destroy his relationship with his son. Maybe I should go, I said quietly. Give him space. Give you both space to work this out. No. Julian crossed to me and pulled me into his arms. Don't you dare. This isn't your fault. It's mine. I'm the adult here. I'm the one who should have known better. We both knew better. I buried my face in his chest. We did it anyway. We stood there holding each other while the weight of what had just happened settled over us. Everything had changed in the span of 5 minutes. The secret was out, and there was no going back. Julian tried calling Carter that night. It went straight to voicemail. He tried texting. No response. By midnight, we'd both accepted that Carter wasn't ready to talk. Might not be ready for a long time. I stayed the weekend anyway because leaving felt like giving up, like admitting this had all been a mistake. Julian and I talked through every scenario, every possible way to fix this. But in the end, we both knew there was no quick solution. Carter needed time, and we had to give it to him, even if it killed us. I flew home Sunday with a heavy heart. Julian looked 10 years older as he hugged me goodbye at the airport. I'll fix this, he promised, somehow. But weeks passed, and Carter wouldn't take Julian's calls. He moved out of the house and into an apartment near campus. He blocked both of us on social media. The few times Julian caught him in person, Carter walked away without a word. The guilt was eating Julian alive. I could see it in the circles under his eyes during our video calls, hear it in the way his voice had lost its confidence. He was choosing me over his son, and it was destroying him. One night in November, 2 months after Carter found out, I made a decision. I think we should take a break, I said during our nightly call. Julian went still. What? Carter isn't going to forgive you while we're together. But if we stop, if you show him that you're putting him first, maybe he'll come around. Devin, no. Julian, you're miserable. You barely sleep. You're not eating. This is killing you. And you think breaking up will fix that? His voice was sharp. You think I'll be less miserable without you? Maybe not at first, but eventually. And you'll have your son back. I don't want my son at the cost of losing you. He scrubbed a hand over his face. I won't choose between you. I can't. You shouldn't have to choose. My voice broke. But he's your son, Julian. He was in your life long before I was, and he'll be there long after I'm gone. Don't say that. You're not going anywhere. But I was. In my heart, I'd already made the decision. I loved Julian too much to watch him lose his relationship with Carter because of me. And maybe that's what real love was. Knowing when to let go. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." I ended the call before he could argue, then blocked his number because I knew if he called I'd answer, and this would all be for nothing. I cried myself to sleep that night and woke up feeling like someone had carved out my insides. Julian showed up at my apartment 2 days later. I opened the door to find him standing there looking like he hadn't slept since our call, desperation written all over his face. "You don't get to make this decision alone," he said. "We're in this together, remember? Julian, you can't be here. I'm not losing you." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Carter will come around or he won't, but I'm not giving you up to speed up that process. Do you understand me? I'm not choosing between you. I'm choosing both of you, and he needs to accept that. What if he doesn't? Then that's his choice." Julian cupped my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. "But I won't let fear dictate my life. I love you, Devin. That doesn't go away just because it's complicated." I wanted to argue, wanted to be strong enough to push him away for his own good. But I was weak, and I loved him. And when he kissed me, I kissed him back and let myself believe that maybe we could survive this, after all. Christmas came, and Carter still wasn't speaking to either of us. Julian spent it alone while I went home to my parents, both of us miserable in our separate spaces. New Year passed in similar fashion. Winter dragged on, cold and gray and endless. Then in February, 5 months after everything fell apart, Julian's phone rang. Carter's name on the screen. Julian stared at it for 3 rings before answering, his hand shaking. "Carter?" I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I watched Julian's face go through a dozen emotions. Shock, relief, caution, hope. "Yes," he said. "Of course. Tomorrow works. I'll be there." He hung up and looked at me with tears in his eyes. He wants to meet, to talk. They met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. Julian came back 3 hours later looking emotionally wrung out but lighter somehow. "He's not okay with it," Julian said, "but he's willing to try. He said he can't lose me, even if he doesn't understand this." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Carter and I didn't talk for another month after that. But eventually, slowly, he started responding to texts. Short answers at first, nothing personal, but it was something. It took almost a year before Carter could be in the same room with Julian and me together, without looking uncomfortable. Took another 6 months before he could joke about it, awkwardly, but sincerely trying. "You're happy?" he asked me one day, the first time we'd really talked since everything imploded. "Yeah," I said honestly. "I am." He shook his head, but there was a hint of a smile. "He better treat you right, because you might be dating my dad, but you're still my best friend, and if he hurts you, I'll kick his ass." It wasn't perfect. We'd never get back to the easy friendship we had before, but it was real, and it was enough. Julian and I made it through law school long distance, made it through the bar exam and my first job and all the complications of building a life together when the world wasn't always kind to couples like us. Age gap jokes, judgment from people who didn't understand, strangers who thought they had a right to comment on our relationship. But we had each other, and we had Carter's grudging acceptance, which eventually turned into genuine support. And that was everything. 5 years after that first day in the pool, Julian asked me to marry him. We were back at his house in the pool where it all started, and when he pulled out the ring, I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. Carter was the first person we told. He hugged his father, then hugged me, and said he was happy for us, even if it was still weird. We got married the following summer in a small ceremony with close friends and family. Carter stood as Julian's best man, and the speech he gave made everyone cry. "I didn't understand this at first," he said, looking between his father and me. "Couldn't wrap my head around how my best friend and my dad ended up together. But watching them over these past years, seeing how they are with each other, I get it now. Love doesn't follow rules. It doesn't care about age or circumstances or what other people think. It just is. And what they have is real, and I'm proud to be a part of it." Julian and I held hands through the whole speech, both of us fighting tears. This man who we'd hurt, who we'd asked to accept something he had every right to reject, had chosen love over anger, had chosen us over his hurt. That night, as Julian and I danced at our reception, I thought about that summer day in the pool, about how impossible this had seemed, about how many times we almost gave up. "What are you thinking about?" Julian asked, pulling me closer. "How lucky I am," I said, honestly. "How lucky we are." He kissed me, soft and sweet, and I knew he was thinking the same thing. This hadn't been easy, might never be completely easy, but it was ours, and it was real, and it was worth every moment of pain it took to get here. We built a life together. Julian and me and Carter in his orbit, complicated and messy and more beautiful than I ever imagined possible. And every summer, on the anniversary of that first day, we'd slip into the pool at midnight and hold each other under the stars, remembering how it all began. Love isn't simple, but the best things never are.